1980s, if you were ever fortunate enough to spend a Friday evening dining at Raffaelli's in Edinburgh, just around the corner from Charlotte Square, you would most likely see Graeme Souness, sat at the usual table, keeping a regular dinner date with a friend. The pair had been introduced shortly after Souness's arrival back in Scotland, when he was a guest for some time at the hotel owned by his new acquaintance. Despite personal tragedy, he was a rising star in Scottish business, mainly in steel, but he had dabbled in the world of sport with an attempt to create a wider interest in British basketball and an unsuccessful bid to buy his hometown football club, Ayr United. Souness had often told him that if he really wanted to get into football, then he should be at the top. By the summer of 1988, with his observations about the change in energy in David Holmes fresh in his mind, he started to suggest that Rangers might well be a possibility. David Murray told him to keep him updated should the opportunity arise. I'm Martyn Ramsey, this is Dominant, and to discuss the arrival of David Murray and some notable games through the winter and spring of 88-89, I'm joined by Andy McGowan. How are you, Andy?
I'm great, Martyn. Thanks for having me back on.
Pleasure. And John Cowden's here as well. How are you, John?
Fine. Glad to be back again.
Oh, such enthusiasm there. It was 3 days after that defeat at Pittodrie, where Ian Durrant was injured, that Souness kind of took the plunge and approached the chairman, David Holmes, about the possibility of a change in ownership. He got a sense that things were not all well, and his hunch was correct. Lawrence Malborough was more and more concentrating his attention in building projects in Nevada, and he was keen to invest further there. They would turn out not to be successful at all and would actually bring the Lawrence group down. Malborough, with his long family links to the club, wanted out, and a new brand of 80s self-made man wanted in. Murray and Malborough first met on the 21st of October, immediately promising, leading to more meetings over the following 4 weeks, resulting in the final signing meeting in the boardroom at Ibrox on Tuesday the 22nd of November. It wasn't a completely smooth process in the end. A deal for $6 million for 75% of the club, with the market position that Rangers had, despite an overdraft of several £1 million, was considered something of a bargain. To put it into context, Tottenham were recently valued at $13 million and of course did not have the exposure of European football. When it became known within the family that a deal was closed for the figure discussed, it caused a bit of alarm. Marlborough's brother Norman felt that it was vastly undervalued and sought to try and block it or attract another bidder. Through another family member, the media tycoon Robert Maxwell was approached and expressed an interest too in buying Rangers. When this was relayed to Holmes, the Murray deal went into overdrive, with changes to the contract being made up until 3 minutes to midnight when it was finally signed. The following day, the new Rangers owner was introduced to the media, flanked in the Blue Room by Souness, Holmes, Malborough and Jack Gillespie. A life-changing decision for Murray, Andy, and an era-defining one for Rangers. Before we talk about the actual transition and whatnot, your memories of that story?
It was, how can I put this? It just happened, and there wasn't much. See if that was to happen to nowadays, right?
Yeah,
So we're
yeah.
football fans much more well versed in terms of football finances, how things work, and they're more suspicious. But this is, if you asked a Rangers supporter in the 70s or 80s who owned Rangers really, as per shareholding and stuff like that, they wouldn't be able to tell you. We kind of knew Lawrence Malborough was there in the background, and we knew there were shareholders, but it wasn't really something that was common parlance amongst football supporters. So when this happened, my recollection, you'll know better than me, Martyn, having researched the book, but it happened very fast. And Murray was a bit of he wasn't an enigma, because that means he liked to stay in the background. He was like a film entrepreneur, right? It was like somebody who'd seen a film who bought up sports franchise and had this thirst to be to go beyond business. And you used to see him sitting at the side of the pitch for the basketball team, or sitting at the side of the pitch for the who else did he have? Was it hockey teams or something like that? Basketball. What was the other sports he used to do, Martyn? I can't remember. But
basketball was his big thing, yeah.
Basketball, and he'd be at the court side, and we obviously knew that he'd had the accident and he had the crutches, and it just added this kind of era. This guy's got something about him, kind of thing. And it's in the middle of Thatcher's 1980s He's a success story, pretty close to a self-made man, and he's done it within Scotland. And he's young. You know, what age was he?
37. 37 years 37. Old. So, and again, Souness identified very much with that political philosophy, and identified very much with this guy. This was the future, and very much in keeping with Souness's image as well. John, we'll discuss the David Murray influence from here till 1998, because that's obviously when this series ends. And of course there would be some ups and downs even through that period. The seeds being sown maybe for some worse decisions to come. But I think it's probably fair to say, out of the two likely buyers around this time, Murray was certainly more preferred than Robert Maxwell, with his huge debt, discovery of the vast fraud that he'd committed, and then of course would die mysteriously in 1991. The reaction of those who would later be fiercely critical of him was fairly favourable. Mark Dingwall, follow very early in its infancy at this point, 4th edition I think, was wary but hopeful. We'd all like to see Rangers achieve the sort of dominance we once enjoyed in Scottish football, and the sort of dominance in Europe that Real Madrid had in the late 50s. To do so requires money, and we'll support any scheme that raise that sort of dosh, short of seeing the club taken over by soulless multinational or seeing the ordinary fan ripped off. And the price of that success would be a tension that would kind of run through the decade that was to follow. I guess the Murray transition and the Murray deal, that this new change at the top of the club was maybe sweetened, John, by the fact that Graeme Souness was now a director and a second largest shareholder in the club. 600 grand of his own money he put in. He felt he needed what he called total involvement. And this kind of Gordon Gekko world, he saw that as just a kind of natural extension for him. Technically a player, although wasn't playing much at this time, but player, manager and director, Souness was all in. Your memories of that whole move?
Unfortunately, unlike Andy, I can remember our various garage owners through the late 70s and 80s and the various car crashes taken on. He's quite a high-profile guy, quite a successful guy, although did he not, just before Rangers, he tried to bring out, was it a Sunday Scott or something?
While he was at Rangers, the Sunday Scott, yeah, and it was a bit of a failure, yeah.
Whatever. So he was obviously a man in a hurry. I think the accident, probably people would say, was a driver. Life's short, which can often happen with many people, and he was a success. I know there was the whole thing around the basketball, but I mean MIM or whatever was a big thing. It was actually, weirdly, where lots of football owners, etc., made money. Thinking, do you call him Jack
Walker,
Blackburn Rovers? Yeah. So there was a lot of money all around that, and honest, I think we were more comfortable with him than even Marlborough. I think we were very comfortable with David Holmes. Yeah, I think he felt almost like a Walter figure before Walter came to the fore. He was a very much a man that we could fit into, who portrayed Rangers. Lawrence Marlborough, Nevada, was he there? Was he not? Etc. He'd done a lot in bringing Souness in, but he'd also been in the board and kicking around for the previous 8, 9, 10 years. And his father was, or grandfather before that, when actually we didn't spend money. So Murray was a man in a hurry, which was like Souness. I mean, Souness had great vision, but planning and strategy, as we'll probably discuss going through, not so much, and never actually really got there. But in terms of seeing the grand vision, the end result, and everything felt like it fitted culture at that point, because we were a team in a hurry. We were making up for lost time. Souness wanted to get there. Murray was seemed to be the same. That appetite, that kind of anxious, nervous energy almost to do well. because you have to succeed all that. I suppose you'd call it Thatcherite late 80s, but it wasn't all about making money. It was about generating money. But I think he bought into Rangers for ego, for prestige, the same as he tried to do with the Sunday newspaper, and we were that vehicle. But we were quite happy, given where we are. You know, it's not as if he's coming in and signalling anything, asset stripping or whatever. Obviously, they don't know everything like that, but it does look, he's talking the talk, and it would appear he has access to money to make it happen. You know, and he's quite happy to keep the fans on board, because what I do remember from being a shareholder is that he had to make an offer for all the shares.
Yeah.
But he was saying, I don't think it was for financial purposes. Maybe it was for the extra 2 million. You know, he'd prefer all the other shareholders not to cash in their chips. Yeah. And I think very few did, because it was an emotional purchase.
Yeah. Can we just make clear, because this is one of the biggest, or a couple of the biggest myths, Andy, that would then get intertwined into the David Murray story, is that the 90s kind of wore on. David Murray did not bring Graeme Souness to Rangers. Be absolutely clear about that. And David Murray, in terms of putting money into Rangers, is probably very limited. That 6 million went to Lawrence Marlborough. Now, he was taking on an overdraft that was starting to get quite pretty hefty, and his remit really would be to generate more, and to expand a business side that was already expanding, and it was already pushing turnover into numbers that Rangers had never seen before. But this was not a takeover with funds flowing into the club.
No, and again, the kind of financial illiteracy of football supporters per se at that time meant that, you know, that was above our heads, more or less. What we were seeing was we were on this kind of upward trajectory that we've spoken about in previous episodes. There was this sense of nothing can stop us. You know, you're talking about the European Cup in realistic terms, and things like this were happening in football. People were buying football clubs. I don't know if Berlusconi was on Milan at that point in time. You had that kind of model popping up around Europe at major clubs now. And I think that was the way we viewed it, that we were along the same lines. You know, you've got this super entrepreneur with bags of cash and unlimited ambition, and he'd bought the club. And I don't think anybody's seen anything as a negative. You know, you talked about Mark Dingwall there, and follow as a centre of influence, a beginning to be a centre of influence. There was no real critique about it, and it happened fast. As I say, it wasn't as if there was a long protracted.
Yeah, months and months of leaks, and this might happen, which you would get now.
Yeah,
you wouldn't get a story. Yeah. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Another thing to make
that, just for Murray, just asking you know better than me, man. I don't think he came in and promised he was going to put in a lot of his own money.
No,
I think he came in on the premise of, I wouldn't say necessarily an underperforming assets, but he was saying there are areas that we could exploit to raise revenues, which would go into the team. So I don't think he was putting money in, but I don't think he was putting money out. And also he had the financial clout, which was better than Marlborough's, I think, by now. The NIM group, of which if you're owning 70-odd% of the shares, it would be part of the overall, it would be a group company. Therefore, the whole debt thing would go. But I don't think at this stage, he may have claimed later, I think he probably did, they'd put in the money. At this stage, he's not promising to put in the money. It's more, we will have access. And he was talking about, we'll go for European glory, we're going to expand the commercial side, all of these things. But in fairness to the guy at that point, I don't think he makes any false promises.
No, he's not here as...
He is the real article.
Yeah, he is not turning up as a sugar daddy. That's absolutely clear, and I think that's fair. Another point to note, David Holmes is still there. David Holmes is still Rangers chairman. David Holmes will be Rangers chairman until the end of the season. But his role is instantly changed. As we know, David Holmes came in as a chief exec, then later as chairman, basically to act on behalf of an absentee landlord really, and that was the deal. You have an owner or a majority shareholder, and he employs his chief exec, who's excelled in business thus far with the Lawrence Group, to run the club as he sees fit, really, with kind of regular communication. But Lawrence Marlborough was not hands on. I think that's fair to say. It was David Holmes who acted as a chief exec, and acted with dynamism, but a grounded dynamism. I think there was no his attitude to risk, I think, was sensible compared to the story that would obviously develop much later on. And I think it's probably clear looking back early that David Murray is not going to be an absentee landlord. He certainly speaks about Holmes staying in place and needing that. And eventually we talk about getting a chief exec in. We will get to Montgomery and how that was a disaster. But he would be far more hands-on, far more involved. And I wonder, Andy, what the best kind of model is. We're speaking from this kind of perspective. Because there's something quite attractive about the majority shareholder that says, look, I don't have time for this. I'm not going to pretend I have time for this. I'm not going to pretend I've got the skill set for this. But this guy served me well in business thus far. He's making some good decisions. I will give him the energy to kind of expend. And it's a proper chief exec who is pretty much free to act. That seems to me to be maybe a romantic ideal now, because football clubs are so dominated by owners, egomaniacs, who see it as their show thing, their plaything. But there was something quite a nice sweet spot perhaps with Holmes's running and maybe early Murray, that you just have that dynamism that's required, but it's grounded dynamism, if that makes any sense.
I hear you, Martyn. I'm thinking about the Glazers at Man United. I don't know if the Man United fans would agree with you there, but it's as I keep saying, the model wasn't fully formed then. We didn't know. There was no rules to this. You had the Berlusconi model, where his ego was certainly driving what Milan were doing, and he was using it as a vehicle for himself and his own self-publicity. There was hints of that with Murray for me, and I think as time going, we saw that was probably the case as well. And it ties in with, what John just mentioned, the Sunday Scot. He had ambitions beyond normal business. He wanted to be a
Murdoch
media magnate. He wanted to be everything. Aye, a Murdoch. He wanted to be everything. Scotland was just a starting point for him, the launch pad, I suppose. So Rangers were part of that vision. I would dare say, in Murray's mind, that it certainly raised his profile way, way beyond anything else he could have done in normal business kind of parlance in Scotland. Buying Rangers, what a statement of intent. And the ego was there. I don't think it would have got to where it was at age 38, given the kind of accident and everything else, if you've not got an ego and a drive that's beyond the norm. I think at that point in time, it was the right thing for Rangers. I think David Holmes, the writing was on the wall as soon as Murray came in. Yeah. That wasn't going to last too long. I think, let's not rewrite history. I think we quite enjoyed the early years of David Murray because he was young, he was ballsy, he was super, nakedly ambitious. We all bought into it. We joined into that kind of dream vision. And things happen.
Yeah, I will get this across because I think it's an important part of history. That's absolutely right. There would have been dissent. Of course, there's Rangers, so that's life as a Rangers fan. But go through the fall of falls all the way through this. Murray gets criticism, but still you get Mark and others saying without David Murray, we wouldn't be kind of in the position we are. This is later on, as the 90s kind of developed. So there's still this kind of appreciation. One big change before Holmes, the Rangers board would have a board meeting every week, even if there's nothing new to talk about. And that sense of a kind of town community planner committee That's very officious, and it's all about process rather than any ideas, any thinking, any dynamism. And it was just, the agenda hardly changed. And then you get to the other stage, late Murray, where you'd hardly have a board meeting at all. You maybe have one twice a year because you have an autocrat, really. And that's what I mean about the sweet spot with Holmes and early Murray, where you probably just have that balance right. You'll never get it perfect. That's football.
No, it is the right way to go. It's what you have, and David Holmes is probably about the best CEO we've had in my lifetime. Yeah. Is he is answerable to someone, and
but his strings aren't pulled.
And take it thing. He's got the power, but he's still answerable to justify the longer term things. Whereas when you go to the opposite end, latter day Murray, as you said, no, but he makes the decisions, and it's like American presidents after 6, 7, 8 years. There's nobody left to challenge him, and nobody there to say, "Hang on a minute, is this really the way to go?" He just does what he does. It. No one gets all decisions right all the time. Whereas with Holmes, I think Holmes does it with Souness as well. It's like you're in charge of transfer policy, etc., but you're answerable for results at the end of the day, and also behavioural, etc. Yeah. Holmes was the same, and it really was. And it was only latter day Murray, when all the power is there, and it took us 8, 9 years to get to that point, maybe 10, as opposed to where we seem to be at the moment, where we've just accelerated through a decade and a year. That there is an answerability and there's an accountability that Holmes was he was built on our traditional values. He wasn't a Rangers supporter, but the values were there. The Scottish Calvinist, Presbyterian, bank manager almost, self-made. And he was answerable, he was looking after it, he was ambitious. And I think it was sad he had to go, but obviously because Murray wanted to run it. And he was fine at the beginning, but there was no one to challenge him in later days. And that's when you don't get all the decisions right, and you do need somebody who can put you aside and say, "Hang on a minute, are you really sure this is the way to go? Have you thought about?" And I think we had it at this point, as you say, the sweet spot, and had it for 3 years with Holmes. And now, slowly but surely, and you don't notice it until later on, you get to that point where we have an autocrat who makes all sorts of decisions. Some are right, many are wrong, but probably doesn't want to admit that they're wrong. And that becomes the issue, where there's no accountability. And that becomes a real problem later on, but that's for well down the track.
Quick point before we go into the football. The Souness side of this. Serious money, personal wealth for a football manager to be putting into a club this size in the November of 1988. Again, £600,000. It has an impact, Andy, when he's trying to do everything, but that was how he was, I guess, at that time. On the 11th of August 88, there's a kind of warm tabloid feature on the Souness family, and there's this picture of them, and life behind the fame and all of that. By 17th of March 89, the exact same photo was used in a story about divorce proceedings and a custody battle. This takes its toll. Your thoughts or memories about Souness being a director as well, and just having that kind of input, because he was talking about, I'm here now. I'm here for keeps, and unless the club tell me otherwise. There was a sense of stability about it.
I said earlier on about ripping up the rules. There was no rule book at that point, and Souness was part of that. I mean, I don't think there had been, player manager Dalglish he'd had maybe. Then he comes in and you've got he's went from player manager to director manager, and again, if my memory serves me correct, there was no grumbles, there was no objections to this. Whereas now we'd be saying, hold on a minute, we've just got a manager that's less, embedded himself with the bricks. What happens if we have to get rid of him? Or that's what questions would be asked nowadays. Whereas then it was just a case of, he was a god, so he was kept, and the dissenting voices were very, very few and far between, and generally dismissed. And isolated, because you're in a pre-social media world, so they're probably saying it in a pub to their pals, and that's about the extent it gets heard. So, I mean, the dynamism and you know, everything I've spoken about in terms of Murray's image applied to Souness as well. You know, he was a child of Thatcher and taking advantage of everything that period of time was offering to people who wanted to go places. And it was just look back on it, it's a really, really strange and groundbreaking thing to happen. But it just happened. And then it was, you know, it was yesterday's news, and all of a sudden we've got Souness as a director as well as a manager. Nobody thought anything.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, you kind of run-of-the-mill fan. Nobody's thinking out the box in terms of, hold on a minute, what are the implications of this? It was just accepted.
Friday, 25th of November.
I mean, I've got to pick you up on this one. It's what, 30 odd years since this happened. Go back the 30 previous years.
Yeah.
There was a Rangers manager, would have been, I don't know if he was a director, but he certainly engineered the coup to ensure that he had all the power and Bill's proof. Therefore, for people of a certain age, not me, but grandfathers or whatever, it's not the rarity, it's not unique. There's certainly egos and everything, but it's.
I mean, Waddle was a
forerunner.
Yeah, it does,
and was moving on. So we're kind of used to.
There's a difference,
big personalities.
Yeah, there's a difference though, and football managers, ex-managers, you know, senior figures being directors. I don't think it wasn't anything new as you've just mentioned, but that level of investment, being the second largest shareholder in the club.
I think it's ego. I mean, we know it's ego. It's like you probably get out of Dalglish, you're only a manager. I'm a director. You can almost, wouldn't be the only driver. He'd probably see it, but you know, it's one of those things. It's like you work for BT. You know, you want shares in the company. It's on a much higher level. Everybody in the late 80s, one of the big things that springs up is employee ownership. Yeah, and the higher you are, the more you have. And this is just a natural extension, together with the ego. He's made it, as I say, Souness had vision. More I look at it, he had no strategy or plan to get from where he was to the vision that it was going to be. But yeah, absolutely. But I can imagine him with Dalglish, or you're only a manager.
Yeah. But Souness, you can imagine him coming out of the Odeon after watching Wall Street and being confused as to why everyone thought that Gordon Gekko was not the hero of the story. He would have been all over that, I think. Yeah, Friday 25th of November, they had their usual Friday night dinner in Edinburgh. The next day would be Murray's first match in the director's box, not as chairman, of course, but as owner. And Souness says that Murray started the meal by saying, it'd be good to get a win tomorrow, and then moving on to how much we need to win tomorrow, and finish up by the end by saying we have to win tomorrow. It's getting under his skin already. The urgency was understandable because it was Aberdeen that were visiting Ibrox, unbeaten in the league, only 2 points behind, and the mounting injuries. There was a mountain of injuries, as we mentioned in the last pod. They're stacking up at Ibrox, so much so that the Friday, Souness had managed to get the Liverpool midfielder Kevin McDonald up on loan just to flesh the squad out a wee bit. He wouldn't play too many matches, but he would be a substitute that day. But Rangers responded in the way that I think would just characterise that winter period. Never at full strength, but they would keep challengers at arm's length and big results when needed. And it was a 1-0 win, a Richard Gough goal being all that separated the sides, and that lead extended to 4 points going into December, where there would be some setbacks. Dundee United, a kind of troublesome visitor at Ibrox under the Souness era. They enjoyed a 1-0 win, and immediately in the back of that was a 2-0 defeat at Tynecastle. Mark Walters sent off for 2 yellows. A wee echo of the season before, but it would be the second and final red card of that season. Rangers still had a lead of 2 points. There'd be another defeat in January at Fir Park on the 7th. Richard Gough own goal, making the difference in a 2-1 defeat. But in between, Rangers kind of ground out some 1-0 wins. That 1-0 win against Aberdeen, there was a 1-0 win over Hibs at Ibrox. Ian McCall with a an incredible late winner. And away to Hamilton Accies on New Year's Eve, a lovely Derek Ferguson goal, who is back in the picture now. In between that, those wins and the Motherwell defeat was, of course, the Old Firm New Year's game. Rangers not quite in that flamboyant mood, far more attritional mood, not scored more than one goal in a match in 7 weeks. I mean, surely there was no threat of another high-scoring evisceration of their old rivals.
There's only a minute gone. Celtic to take this. It's just there, yes. Morris, 1-0. Free kick to Rangers. Wilkins will take this. There's Butcher with it. It's in. Butcher, the equaliser. Butcher, superb in the air. Here's Walters. And Rangers get the free kick. Brown on towards Ferguson. Here's Drinkle. Feels for a penalty, it's given. It's there. Rangers are in the lead, 2-1. Mark Walters puts them there. Ferguson with the shot, it's there. Deflection, I think. In came Ferguson, and that shot whistled in, and I think there was a deflection. But Rangers are now 3-1 in the lead. Straight to McCall. Drinkle. That's a beautiful ball. Here's Walters through. Walters with a great chance, and he done it. Number 4 for Rangers in a breakaway.
Well, John, despite Tommy Burns assuring us that this would never happen again, it did. The 5-1, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, it was maybe just one of those afternoons, the sun's shining and everything's flowing your way. Rangers have been beaten at Parkhead, of course, 3-1. And Celtic go ahead early. But, I mean, this is the stuff of dreams, is it not?
Yeah, you don't expect it. We've demolished them, and then they've come back and got something for their pride. So you're expecting it to settle down. And I don't remember us being, compared to the 5-1 game, I don't remember us being that brilliant this day. It wasn't. I mean, the 5-1
more cat and mouse.
We just blew them away. This one, until even Walters scored late on, it was still, I don't think you ever felt easy. Whereas you were an easy straight before the hour mark in the other one, and they were done. Whereas in this one, and we weren't as cohesive. McCoy's is still, after 2 months, 7 to 10 days away.
Yeah, he's one of those.
Etc.
Woods has got his labyrinthitis.
Yeah. I mean, so we're carrying it, but don't get me wrong. But 4-1 wasn't as comprehensive as the 5-1. The 5-1 was 5-1 going on 10. The 4-1 was a kind of 4-1 victory, rather like, I guess, at the end of 2020, 2021, when we beat them 4-1 and Defoe scored. It was more like that kind of game where the scoreline looks a lot better than maybe the distance between them, whereas the 5-1 flattered Celtic. But it was still moments of inspiration in terms of, Anton Rogan would really start to make his mark in these things. But, Fergie scoring, Butcher, Mark Walters, and that last goal by Walters is just truly superb. As indeed was running along the front of the Copeland, giving the front row high fives. I think he got booked for that. They were done. I mean, at this point, you have to say they were done. I know they were getting a bit closer. Were they 7 points behind or 6?
Yeah, not trouble.
I mean, they're running on empty. They haven't signed anybody really. I think they're going to sign Steve Cahill from the insurance money for stand fire allegedly, but they're not really doing much. They're struggling to be second in a 2-horse race at this point. In fact, they're probably closer to fifth than they are to second, because you've got Aberdeen and Dundee United putting in half decent runs at various points, and we're always ahead in this league race. Just every time you think, oh, the wheel's going to come off, and the Twitter of the day or whatever is just about to absolutely implode, we pull out a performance, as you've mentioned. We beat Aberdeen 1-0, and then we beat Celtic 4-1. So every time people are getting closer, it's like we just pull out something, and
it's arm's length, isn't it?
Again.
Yeah, it's using the turbo.
We're never in danger.
Yeah, it's a turbo start, a comfort for the first time. Souness had never enjoyed that, and it was just reacting. Andy, I think John's right. This isn't like the 5-1 game, even though the scoreline is obviously very similar. This isn't a Rangers team in kind of full flow, because we've discussed on the last show, Woods, Durrant, McCoist missing through injury. It's not butcher in terms of the totemic presence, but that's a big part of your spine of your team gone. A word for Walters, because he scores that penalty, but John's right. Fergie's blasted deflection, he loved, especially as he ran towards the Broomland before quickly changing direction. But Robert Walters fourth, so cool. He's up front with Drinkle, and a bit of an altered formation because of the injuries. The English, Bobby Robson maybe struggled to kind of appreciate him, and I guess he's got John Barnes in that position anyway. But Rangers fans, they took to him very quickly, but this relationship between the fans and Walters is now just kind of gathering pace. He scored in 3 Old Firm games in a row now.
I mean, if you watch the highlights, you can hear the crowd change tone as soon as he gets the ball. He was dynamite. I said that last episode. He's absolute dynamite, and he's tormenting Celtic, and there's nothing else like him in the league. Nothing. Not one player comes close to him in terms of what he can do with the ball at his feet. And he's in the team now, and there's no settling in time for Walters. He's almost hitting the ground running, isn't he? And I agree with you two, the both of you, that it kind of it's a shadow of the 5-1 game, but it's still attacking, and it's still super comfortable. And what my memory of this one is you mentioned there, Martyn, that Derek Ferguson's back in the picture. Is this the game that Derek Ferguson was man of the match, and Souness was quite gushing of him after the game? I think he ran the show for the middle of the park, and obviously he has that through ball for the 4th goal for Walters. So Ferguson is back, and my memory of being at this game was that Ferguson was utter class and totally dominated the midfield, and his passing was brilliant. He was like a young Souness, just like that Souness game we spoke about in previous episodes at New Year. So it just reminded them of their place at that point. They'd won the second Old Firm game 3-1, which you've covered, and then they came back to their place, and again 4-1. It just reconfirmed that the 5-1 wasn't some kind of mad fluke. Yeah,
I mean, Celtic are 7 behind, and, they're 4th place. Aberdeen United in between. The defeat for Park, though, left Rangers just 1 point ahead of Dundee United, as close as any club had been since September. They would win at Hamilton the following weekend, 5-0, Hamilton bottom of the league. So the pressure's acute, and it's probably more acute than we've felt for a while. The fixture on that same weekend for Rangers was, where the first clouds had ever gathered that season, which was Pittodrie. Thankfully, the on-again, off-again relationship between Souness and Derek Ferguson was in a brief period of bliss, because just when Rangers needed it, he was superb again. Rangers won 2-1. You get Ian Ferguson up front with Stuart Monroe on the left side of midfield. Bit of a makeshift Rangers side, but they produced the goods very early on. Ian Durrant's name being belted out by the Rangers fans from the outset. There's maybe a bit of revenge in mind. I know the Skull League Cup final had been won, and the Rangers had beaten Aberdeen at Ibrox, but to go back up in Pittodrie, there was clearly a focus about that Rangers performance. Derek Ferguson and Stuart Monroe, I think, maybe argued about which one of them scored the first, but no doubt about the second. Ian releasing Derek with a delightful through ball, and Ferguson, Derek, that is, smashing it past Theo Stellers, who just got his first Dutch call-up. I will refrain from any Dutch cap jokes there. And yeah, 2-0 very early. Charlie Nicholas would pop up again to make life interesting, but a very gritty, resilient rear guard got Rangers through. It was Souness fulsome in praise of Stuart Munro. John, after that, yet again, it's just another example when things got tight again. This Rangers team responded. There's a maturity about this side that I just don't think's there in those first two seasons.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence that the manager's relaxed, and maybe he's not getting divorced, but I think he's relaxed in terms of his play, the footballing side. And you can see it. And Derek Ferguson was a magnificent talent, slight temperament, and also the shoulder popping out on a regular basis is an issue. But he was, and he said it, what a fantastic player he was. Very different to his brother, I would argue. And so he's probably more like Wilkins and Souness, but I mean, when we thought 6 months previously, when we've got Derek Ferguson and Ian Duran, and possibly if Ian Ferguson lives up to them, that was our midfield set for the next decade.
3 young Scottish
Maybe
players.
Not, because I suspect Duran would have went abroad or south, because he was just way beyond anything. But it was, and I mean, Derek Ferguson, the coolness of that goal at last, we had, I think he wore number 9. We had a number 9 who could beat a keeper 1-on-1 at that point, which Super Ali struggled for a long time before he came. But the first half hour, it was, you're wondering what you're seeing here at Pittodrie, because this isn't a place that you come and just play them off the park for 30, 40 minutes. And we do this in another game later in the season where we go to a bogey ground and just take the game away from the opposition. And okay, they come back into it, but you keep them at arm's length.
It's the season in microcosm, isn't it? It's just so often we do that. It's exactly that.
The only time I'd seen it before was 77, 78, where we started off with 2 defeats, and then we just blitzed everybody away, and everything was done by the end of October. And after that, it was, we'd stutter, and this was the exact same. We're the best team in the league. We switch off or whatever, or we get injuries, we lose a couple or whatever, right? And it's just there, that ability to, move through the gears seamlessly, smoothly, and just, swat Celtic 4-1, beat Aberdeen at Ibrox 1-0, beat Aberdeen up there 2-1, just to say, okay, boys, you think it's coming close? It's not happening. This is ours. And I think, I can't remember panicking all through these defeats, disappointment, not reading the papers, but there wasn't that, like we are, we're worse now than we ever were. But there was, that angst. This wasn't a season of angst. This was a season of absolute self-assurance domestically. This team has it, and when they need to turn it on, they'll just do it.
Yeah.
And they did it all through the season.
But you've got comfort for the first time.
Yes.
So when those defeats happen, there's a cushion, and at this stage,
because there is a cushion.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that Souness alluded to the Fir Park for sure. He said that the 4-1 and the reaction around the country, reaction in the media, was a signal to them that the league was done, and Fir Park was a very stark reminder that it wasn't. So, as Rangers fans, Andy hasn't experienced this, in January anyway, having a defeat, but still having a cushion to absorb that. So it isn't panic stations. Anyway, this is a springboard for the kind of run that seals championships, really. 12 games unbeaten. You've got McCoist and Woods returning in late January and February respectively, and yeah, the foot went down. Should have been, when they get 11 wins in that 12 game run, by the way, should have been full marks. Deeply into injury time at Tannadice. Rangers 1-0 up, Stuart Munro again popping up, but a freak Gary Stevens own goal. I mean deep into injury time, and injury time was a topic of conversation that week. Just the midweek, Scotland were in Cyprus for a World Cup qualifier. 96th minute winner for Richard Gough caused a lot of debate about injury time and the refereeing efficiency or officiating of that. And Graeme Souness was more than happy to add to that debate. And even though he wasn't playing anymore and getting sent off and whatever, this was the start of some more, let's say, desktop discussions at Park Gardens with the SFA, but we'll come back to that maybe in another show. A wee shout out for some trophy silverware that was won during that time. The 10-6s indoor tournament at the SECC, led by Jimmy Nicholl, who was a reserve coach by that time, and dominated by Davy Cooper. Rangers won that. As soon as didn't really like Rangers playing in it, waste of time, could get injured, and he's paranoid about injuries. But we did at that time. There might also been a potential sponsorship friction with McEwen's Lager and Tenants as well. And also, guys, another signing. Mel Sterland, he played on the right side of defence and midfield. He was at Sheffield Wednesday. He came to Ibrox in early March for 800 grand, just because Souness was keen to manage his squad sensibly to the finish, he said. Suspensions and injuries kind of currently obsessing his mind.
I never got this one.
Well, I think he
really
just did it because he could. He
even the position.
But well, yeah.
But the position.
You could get Gary Stevens.
I mean,
yeah.
Gary Stevens is like he's a Rolls Royce. Only he's never going to break down.
But John,
because he just is a supreme athlete.
John, look at the diary that Souness keeps for this season. He is paranoid about injuries, and Gary Stevens is a Rolls Royce. Even more reason then for Souness to be concerned about him kind of breaking down. In the end, Stevens, I mean, he missed one league game. I think he missed one game actually all season. So in the end, he doesn't really use that. But I think it's just because he can do it. But it's more about what this says, guys. Nearly £1 million on a utility player in March, just to provide another option. And this is the same time that Souness was flying to Milan to discuss the potential transfer of Vasily Rats with Dynamo Kiev. It just underlines this financial strength, the ambition. Compare it with Celtic. They had finally sold Frank McAvenny for just over £1 million to West Ham, and they spent less than half of that on Tommy Coyne from Dundee. And the chase for McAvenny's permanent replacement would just be a farce with kind of far-reaching consequences. And it's starting to become a different level. Souness just wants to tidy things, up, keep things ticking over. Well, here's nearly £1 million on some guy that I'll sell at the end of the season for a profit. It's just, I just want a wee bit of cover.
Souness bought players with the same mindset that some folk buy and flip houses. And
yes,
Sterling. The irony with Sterling was that if he was paranoid about injuries, he bought Sterling. Sterling for the whole time he was at Rangers wore the undershort cycling shorts, the groin warmers that were in vogue at that time. And he had the most unmistakable run you'll ever see because his groin was a problem. He used to run with short strides. He ran like a Benny Hill kind of character, and it was effective. It was effective for the time he was there because he scored. Well, certainly scored against Hearts with the day we won the league twice, didn't he? Done his aeroplane celebration. I think he scored a couple others, but he was kind of here and gone. But you're right, Martyn. It was a signal of, we can go out and kind of paper out a wee crack with £1 million signing nearly, and then get rid of them and make our money back because we know the market. Or Souness knew the market so well, and it's unthinkable now that you could bring a player from the top flight in England, increase his value and sell him back to them. So the dynamics are completely different back then, and Souness was thinking again differently. So you're right, he kind of signified something bigger than just a signing a player. It was just a power play.
Yeah. March heads into April. Rangers are still on for a treble, boys. Now, the history in the Scottish Cup, as we know, is not super. Again, one of these other superstitions, these hexes that did keep Souness up at night. It looked like it was going to repeat itself until a brilliant Ian Ferguson equaliser saved Rangers' blushes at Wraith Rovers. The replay at Ibrox was comfortable, as was the next round against Stranraer. The quarter-final, tantalising as it paired Dundee United, who were second at the time, albeit with Rangers now with a 4-point lead. STV grabbed the match, 400 grand for one live league game, one cup tie and two finals. That was the TV deal at that time, as well as the highlights, of course. This was due to be played on Sunday 18th of March before the Scottish weather had other ideas, with torrential, unrelenting rain leaving the Ibrox pitch unplayable. I was supposed to be going. I had a ticket for that day. I was so excited, and that was cancelled or postponed a Tuesday evening, and I don't know how the negotiations went, but I managed to go that night. Brilliant cup football, boys. 2-2. Kevin Gallagher, who Terry Butcher admitted hated playing against due to his pace and movement, put United ahead, and Rangers kind of rocked on their heels for that first half, but the second half was different story. Drinkle and McCoy's quickly putting Rangers ahead. The second goal, please have a look at this. Absolutely brilliant bit of team play. McCoy's given more opportunities to finish. He spurns them and were punished. Pat Lynn equalised later on. The replay was a midweek trip in the middle of two difficult league away games, but I think it's fair to say that McCoy was left in no doubt by his manager and teammates that they only had to make that journey to Dundee because of him, but he assured that he'd sort it out, and he duly did 5 minutes after the break, when he was positioned perfectly to take advantage of a Mark Walters drive that was tipped onto the bar by Billy Thompson, but back out to the Predator-in-Chief. Memories of those two games, guys. I think only the original game, the first game at Ibrox was shown live. I don't think the replay was shown live. I think it was only the highlights. But my memories of it at the time, and it was a joy watching it back. I'll be honest. I thought it was a great cup game, John.
It was a fantastic cup game. I'm still deluded at this point. I always fancy it to be Dundee United when it counts. I always fancy. I don't think we've ever lost to them in a cup tie at this point in our history. Therefore. And that's changed quite a bit afterwards. But at this point, cracking cup tie, but it's playing Wraith Rovers and they are playing Dundee United. Let's be honest, at this point. The Wraith Rovers cup tie was excruciating or anxiety-driven.
Given Hamilton and Dunfermline.
Won. Yeah, exactly. But as Dundee United, it was almost like, okay. And I think they had a better first half, and then we came into it and we're just knocking the door the whole time. But weirdly, I don't know if it's a trust of the United or just the way this season has went, that when we have to step up for a big game in the replay, we'll do it. It's the weirdest feelings. I mean, remember the replay? I mean, it was stunning strike from Walters, and then McCoy's finishing it. And it's just, March is wonderful, which is unusual for us. But March is just we're beginning to click, as you say, post-Pittodrie. Everything's beginning to fall. And the treble is looking on. Yeah. And, and the football's wonderful. That's the other aspect.
I mentioned this in the last programme, John, and I'm happy to bring it up briefly because I'm conscious of time with you two as well. I was talking about the Sandy Jimison book on Graeme Souness. Sandy Jimison he says, from a kind of Rangers family, but he kind of rejects that. He has a Celtic website now. This book was written, 97, 98. He says he's a Clyde fan. And he admits that, his perception of the football, he makes some great points on other things relating to Graeme Souness, but his perception about the football that his team played was the kind of dour Calvinist pragmatist, not particularly aesthetic, and he has to admit in his book to being completely wrong when he's watched a lot of it back. And I'll say it again, this 88-89 Rangers team is vastly underrated in terms of its balance, its quality, just getting that blend between steel and silk correct. And I think these two games, I think you're absolutely right, encapsulated that. Second goal at Ibrox, please go and watch it, listeners, because it's it's not a game that gets talked about. It's not a goal that gets talked about. But there were plenty of them that season, Andy. This is a really, really good team, and it's far better than they get credit for. I think because Souness's physicality, muscularity, presence is obviously more of a physical one, or that's the reputation, and therefore his teams are kind of tarred by that brush. But it's to misunderstand, I think, the player actually as a Liverpool player and a Rangers player, but definitely that side.
I mean, you can't say a team with Ray Wilkins and Mark Walters as two of the mainstays in it is never going to be anything other than, you know, being able to play good football. I mean, there were so many moments in that season where there was bits of exquisite skill. I mean, you talk to that Monroe goal up at Dundee United, that with the one that Wilkins makes a pass that nobody else can make.
Yeah.
Even this contact, you're talking about the two each game. You reference the second goal has been a wonderful bit of play. But even the first goal, the ball in for Waters, and then 2 episodes ago we were talking about what kind of player Drink was. If you want to know what kind of player Drink was, go and watch that goal, because that epitomised him. A powerful header right into the bottom corner, like a kind of Derek Johnson header. The team had loads of skill and loads of flair, and then you had just that nice wee bit of balance where you had bite, you know, you had cameos for John Brown, you had obviously still got Butcher in there, you've got Goff that covers all bases. The team was fantastic, and there was great moments, there was great goals. The Ian McCall goal against Hibs is one that always sticks in my mind, because that was a game where, you know, things were still quite nip and tuck in the league. You're getting in the latter stage of a match where it's nothing each, and you're needing a bit of individual brilliance, and he does it with a absolutely fantastic curling Maradona goal into the top corner. And the whole season was littered with moments like that, because the squad was chock full of talent and cameos. You know, McCall, Ferguson was much a cameo as anything else. Sterling, all these kind of things chipped in to accumulate to the full season.
The replay was Sammy's in between these two games, as I mentioned. The first one was a trip to Easter Road. Rangers won 1-0. Opportunistic but nicely taken, instinctive left foot shot by Kevin Drinkle, which set up the trip to Parkhead for the final Old Firm game. Old Firm League game of the season on April Fool's Day. A 4-point cushion to absorb the blow if the normal sort of result ensued. Rangers hadn't won at Parkhead for 9 years, and to complete the season-long Old Firm trend, there was yet another early goal for the visitors, but it didn't quite pan out as the others did.
Walters, brilliant stop by Walters, and that surely is a free kick. Superb little twist and turn by Mark Walters. None can do it finer than this man. Bit of jockeying for position in there, and that's in! Drinkle left an open chance, and he sunk it. Look at that delirious Ranger support. Now just watch this covering. Really, from a Celtic point of view, quite lamentable. He looked up, nobody challenged, and there was a slight deflection. Anyway, Rangers get the free kick out of that. There's Ferguson with a shot. Oh, it's a brilliant one. And he's gone in. It's a second for Rangers. The goalkeeper couldn't stop it, and I think Ali got the final touch, Ali McCoy's. A superbly struck free kick there. It whistled and brilliantly saved or stopped, and Ali McCoy's just getting in the head in. Rangers are 2 up with about 13 minutes of this have to go, and look at it. Goalkeeper did reach out and flick it back. Morris. There's a great chance, he scored. Walker. Nice touch there, Joe Miller. Richard Gore. It's appealed for a penalty, and a penalty's been given. It's been given for handling by Richard Goff. Given for handling by Goff. Here it is, stretching out awkwardly for that after having such an excellent game. Penalty to Celtic. So, Joe Miller against Chris Woods. When he saved it, and it's passed. What a remarkable penalty kick. That was a very good save, but nevertheless, a really awful. And there goes the final whistle. Rangers have won for only the second time in 9 years in the Premier Division, and that is a gigantic stride towards the championship title itself. There are the Rangers supporters in something like maybe premature celebrations for the league, but certainly quite happy that they won today after such a long period of waiting. I would suggest, with the greatest respect to other clubs, they're going to be very hard to stop indeed now.
What did you base your strategy on today?
Well, I feel if we go out and we defend properly with the players we have in the team, we will always create chances, and we've got players in the team who can take the chances. So really, it's no different to the first day I arrived at the club. I went out and bought the best goalkeeper there is in the business, the best two centre halves there is in the business, and I've now got the best right back in the business. So there's no secret. I base any team
Strength on defence to start off.
Yeah,
with.
I mean you've got to have a foundation, and we've got that.
Compared to the season when you won the championship, you know, just about the same time of the year, do you feel any more strain at all, or are the players feeling any more strain?
I can only speak for myself, and we try and help the players through that. We've got players who haven't been the trip before. Strain in what way? You know, strain, I mean, it's a pleasure being at the top of the league.
The fear of blowing it all, let's put it that way.
That fear's always with you. I mean, being at a club the size of the Rangers, the fear of not going out and winning each Saturday, that's with you all the time, that's with you permanently, and you live with that. And we have now worked very hard for 12 months to get ourselves into this situation, and now we've got another 4 or 5 weeks to possibly go on and maybe win the championship.
John, you and I have done a time capsule on this game. It's there for you to go and enjoy, listeners, the whole 45 minutes or whatever it was. Yet again, early start, but there's a second goal. I don't know what goal line technology would make of that second goal in terms of who actually gets to claim it, but who cares? And Rangers absorb it, just about absorb it. Andy Walker, he's got some time. He's far too much time and space, to be honest, to pull that goal back. And then Richard Goff, if handling wasn't enough, he brought his boy down just for good measure to ensure that the referee couldn't not award the penalty kick. And you must be thinking, this curse, another one of these jinxes just isn't going to lift. But as I said at the outset of this series of episodes on 88-89, Celtic just didn't have the belief. It was a dreadful penalty kick, and it's the kind of thing that happens to teams who are just, they've got their name on the trophy. That was the moment, because Aberdeen were ready to pounce, bring it back to maybe 2 points with the run in. Would have expected Rangers to drop points, and that I think just epitomises this season, this day at Parkhead.
Yeah, it was the most confident I've ever felt beforehand. The week leading up to it was probably the only time I've ever felt confident until Smith really took the thing. I was convinced we were going to win. I predicted the score 2-1. All ends up, and that first half, I just wish it never finished, because it's one of the best first. I mean, we destroyed them in that first half. I remember Walters busting through and just put a shot just going past the post. I thought he should have had a penalty. I mean, they just went at the races, and we took it to them straight from the off, and we were running all over the top of them. And as you say, came out just after usual switch off early on, off they go. It just encapsulates that season. They are devoid of confidence, devoid of belief. And Joe Miller, since he's big money signed from Aberdeen, he seems to shrink about 3 inches, because you look at him in an Aberdeen strip and you think he's a muscular centre forward. You see him in their strip and he looks like a schoolboy. It's the weirdest kind of... He physically seems to shrink even before the penalty. I mean, they're not even all running up and trying to grasp it. You know, you'd have expected Walker, whatever, Aitken. I mean, they just left it to him, and it was a glorious day. Been the last time we'd done it, and let's face it, a last-minute winner, but we kind of rode our luck a little bit. This time, don't know if we were lucky with the penalty save, but
we've earned a luck if we have.
We were well worth a 3 or 4 goal advantage in that after that first half, because we were truly superb. But that encapsulated again this season. Went out, got up early, lost a stupid goal, but managed to hang on, and that was until the very end exactly how this season always panned out, both in matches, but also through the season. We always seem to have just that little bit in the tank. And we weren't a dirty team in this one. You'd say that, you know, the sending offs, but we'd lost. We weren't aggressive in that naked aggression. We were a team that couldn't be messed with, but
he proved his point.
We didn't need it. Yeah,
he proved his point with all the horrendous disciplinary record, and it was horrendous, but it was done purposefully. And there's also a purposeful change. Only 2 sending offs, and that's that. One of those in Europe, and it's just a far more disciplined, far more cultured Rangers side. And none of us know, or none of us knew, that this season would be the first of 9 titles in the trot. But we'd have been confident that, you know, we'd see Rangers retaining the title for the first time in a wee while, and, you know, possibly retain it again. There's a sense of something happening, not just with us, but something weakening with rivals as well. Celtic being obviously the most obvious one. For all the 5-1, 4-1s and the money being splashed here, there, and everywhere, and a new dynamic, forward-looking owner. Is this maybe the result more than anything that says that there is a change here because of the absolute misery that we've experienced at Parkhead for nearly a decade?
I do think there's something in that, Martyn. It was definitely a big monkey off our back, and there was that season saw a bit of a step change in terms of how far ahead of Celtic we were. I would argue that Dundee United and Aberdeen were probably in better shape than Celtic.
Far better.
As clubs, if you want to put it that way. And Celtic, I mean, you just need to look at lineups for games through the season, and guys like, no disrespect, well, I'll give them disrespect then, all right.
If you want.
McCahill and Anton Rogan, you know, players like that were still in their team regardless. Whereas we've spoken about, we were going out and buying players for England for a lot of money as stopgaps. So there was this difference in, you know, engine power that we had over them. We were just going into a different stratosphere for them. And you were starting to think that, you know, this juggernaut that we thought was coming in 1986, you know, where it's only going to end up one day, it was starting to take shape. You could see it on the park. You could see it off the park with Murray and Souness and the things that were happening, the ripping up the rule book with Rangers, leading the way, not just in Scotland, but in UK terms, definitely, sometimes in European terms. We had our eyes on bigger things, and nothing was going to stop it. So you're right, Martyn. This it's hard to pinpoint all that to one result, but, you know, beating Celtic for the first time in how many years was it? 9 years?
9 years.
11.
And it would be 12 years before any of us would experience not winning there again. And that's why I started this series on 88-89 with that penalty. And and the feeling of, oh God, no again, here we go, but something different happening, a different outcome, and I think it does set a tone. There'll be defeats at Parkhead, by the way. Sorry, break that to you listeners. There will be more to come, but there would be joy, and a lot of joy to come.
What is astonishing about this one is the fact that Souness's record up to this point at Parkhead is as good as John Gregg's. It is a horror show in terms of one draw and then 4 straight defeats. And it just is an absolute... And this reaffirms everything. You say it, I mean, and we are written up rule books because are we not building our Guile house and we're going to throw it up in 6 weeks or whatever? Murray's announced the plans, and you're thinking, well, what's he going to do? The government stand, and he builds that. Everything is going our way. You're not looking at 9 in a row, but you are thinking 2, 3 should be more than capable because there's nothing there. And nobody else is there. I mean, Celtic are bust almost literally within years, but they are bust. And Aberdeen and Dundee United are good teams, but they don't have the financial muscle that we have. Sterling, that £1 million transfer for a stopgap, is just another sign that, okay, Murray's not putting money in, but we're going to continue to spend as needed, as required. And and there'll be freak results or whatever, but it's just never going to stop going. I would argue it's 6 years before we don't win at Parkhead again. Because they played at Hampden.
Away. Yeah, that's a fair technical point, but I think you know the point that I was making.
I'm teasing you.
We will stop there.
We could beat them anywhere.
We certainly can. And 5-1, 4-1 Celtic. What's the score and all that? Was an enjoyable tune around that time, gentlemen, and I think we'll stop there. Thank you for your time on this very important series of months, actually, in terms of the whole period story. Thank you, Andy.
A pleasure, man, as always.
And it's all mine. And thank you, John.
Thank you to you both, and especially to Martyn, because we don't need to do next week.
Indeed, yeah, there'll be a sting in this particular tale, but again, there's always another side to that story we'll get into next week. The sense of some kind of coronation to a title is only ever really a formality in hindsight. Rangers still had Motherwell to come to Ibrox and a trip to St Mirren straight after that Celtic win, and neither were fixtures that had ever been really kind during the Souness era thus far. However, there was an unmistakable feeling throughout the Rangers support that a strong grip both on and off the park was beginning to be felt by the rest of the country. Rangers were the future, from the pre-season preparation and depth of quality on the park to the stadium, the market ambition and new revenue streams. Rangers now represented modernity. However, April 1989 was about to provide the footballing world with a horrific reminder of what it had hoped represented the past. Until next time, bye for now.